My fundamental thesis here is that the enemy of change is satisfaction with the status quo. And it's easy to grow satisfied with the status quo. When the status quo is good, meaning that it works within the ecosystem, the enemy is strong, and the change paradigm suffers. The cost of switching from the status quo is simply too high. When the status quo is disrupted or is toxic, as it became in March of 2020, change is the victor as the switching costs drop dramatically. After all, when you run out of options, change looks very attractive. A simple example is your family doctor who was unable to see you face to face in a normal appointment setting, probably starting around March or maybe April of 2020, rather than forego that revenue and missing their customers and their patients. Instead, they switched to telemedicine. And that switch to telemedicine became a wholesale switch for an entire industry that happened arguably almost nearly overnight. I mean, it was just like, boom, there it is. Telemedicine, which was always laying in the weeds as a kind of a minority player, suddenly became the majority solution for a lot of practitioners. Agility and speed to adapt, combined with insight as to how the world works, will allow innovation to accelerate at a phenomenal rate. It is said that the dinosaurs went extinct as a result of the Chicxulub asteroid, named after the town that it lies near its center. It hit Earth 66 million years ago with a force so incredible that it wiped out around 75% of the species on the planet, including the dinosaurs. New research has revealed that the area where the gigantic asteroid struck Earth, which is now Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, was among the worst possible places it could have made contact with the planet. Experts determined that if the asteroid had struck nearly anywhere else, the dinosaurs would have survived. The asteroid directly impacted rocks in a shallow sea, which are particularly rich in hydrocarbons. The scientists explained that that event would not have been nearly as devastating had the asteroid hit on hard rock, which covered nearly 87% of the Earth's surface. So, yeah, it was a really, really bad day, right? Modern day birds have feathers, tails, and bodies, unfused shoulder bones, toothless beaks, and forelimbs that are longer than their hind limbs. They also have a bony plate near their tails called the pygostyle. Other types of extinct theropods have one or more of these features, but only modern birds have all of them. According to an assistant professor from Japan, these are the remnants of the dinosaurs living among us today. So welcome to the new normal, otherwise known as the stay-at-home economy, accelerating change in ways that none of us foresaw. Perhaps none of us foresaw that we would be not just working from home, teaching our children from home, and managing our household, and literally spending 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The household has become our end-all be-all, including our gym, our facility for study and for doing work. It's basically become everything to us, right? What is the role of the urban core? What is the need for transit systems? What does business attire mean anymore? Better grade of maybe sweatshirt or sweatsuits, right? Who needs a barber when you've got a spouse to cut your hair, right? What does rush hour mean? All sorts of changes now in the way we look at our world, the way we define ourselves within that world. Some examples of overnight innovational successes this year disrupting the status quo ante, meaning what was going on prior to 2020. We've already talked about Zoom, 200% revenue growth year on year. Telemedicine, Teladoc Health up 114%, Livongo Health up 430%. Amazon grocery sales rose 300% in one quarter. As somebody who's used Amazon food services and food delivery for maybe 3 years, I can tell you the last 6 months have been very chaotic for them. Many items were out of stock, supply disruptions, et cetera, stock outs, delays, mistakes, rapid growth, a new driver every time, et cetera, et cetera. Peloton, of all things, right? You're working out at home, you're probably using a Peloton. The growth of 77% of their business in one quarter. Netflix, 92% operating income year over year. Growth, basically now at 1.36 billion. Electronic arts, gaming, home gaming, right? Operating income increase of $400 million. That's another 104% increase year over year. Now, with all of the good, I guess, comes some bad, and with some of the bad is the supply chain disruptions that we've been seeing. Here is clearly a graph that shows, on the one hand, the time available before impact of disruption, which is the y-axis, the x-axis being the predictability of that disruption. You can see that epidemics are both somewhat predictable, but have a huge impact, pretty much the same as a political crisis, or even worse in some cases than a natural disaster. So we're experiencing supply chain disruptions now in many industries, especially food. You can see here the massive growth in supply chain logistics technology, meaning that there's too many people involved in the supply chain and getting hands away from the product. A hands-free delivery is becoming the objective of many businesses, especially Amazon. Imagine if their entire system were automated. That supply chain technology that will be behind that automation is growing by leaps and bounds. As you can see by this chart, basically June 2020, 11% saw this as a major potential for growth versus 2% a year earlier. So clearly, this is the growth area. Almost every other technology, except for maybe food and fin, are in decline. Okay, warehouse automation accelerated, right? This basically is a graphic that shows some of the types of technologies we're looking at here. Robotics, this is actually automatic storage and retrieval systems, ASRS. PitchBook, which actually tracks startups across all industries, shows that there's a 57% increase in warehouse automation just this year. So a massive increase, right? So anything that's distributing product to customers, a B2C model such as Amazon, is trying to streamline, automate, and eliminate staffing so that effectively they can do a hands-free delivery no matter how long this pandemic lasts or how deep it goes. I'd like to look at 4 industries with you today very quickly: pharmaceuticals, the personal mobility industry, or Uber, Disney, and venture capital. Let's start with pharmaceuticals, because that's what we're mostly focused on these days, right? A vaccine for COVID. There's easily 9 companies chasing a COVID vaccine, only 3 of which are US companies, and 2 are US companies working with other countries and firms. This is a snapshot from J&J, Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, GSK, et cetera. So these are the companies chasing the vaccines. Most of the pharmaceutical ingredients used in making America's drugs are manufactured outside the US. Kodak Pharmaceuticals will make ingredients that have lapsed into chronic national shortage, meaning that they're very difficult to get because of import issues and tariff issues across various countries, right? And once the unit is fully up and running, it will be able to make up to 25% of active pharmaceutical ingredients used in non-biologic, non-antibacterial generic pharmaceuticals. Kodak CEO expects pharmaceuticals to eventually comprise 30 to 40% of Kodak's business, right? Well, wait a minute here. This isn't where Kodak started, or is it, right? If you look back at 1880, George Eastman was focused on dry plates and inventions surrounding that, and introducing the first camera in 1888. They did enter the pharmaceutical business, but it was about 100 years later with the purchase of Sterling Drug. Kodak then exited the traditional film camera business, right, in 2004, bested by the very technology that they invented back 29 years earlier. Kodak filed for bankruptcy in 2012, quickly exiting the digital camera business, an industry, again, where they were the pioneer. Even though they invented the technology and they held the patents, they were never able to make money from digital. Starting in July of 2020, Kodak announced that with a government loan of $750 million, they will transform themselves into a pharma ingredients producer. Stock prices rose dramatically, so fast that 20 circuit breakers were tripped during the trading session, and a loan was processed as part of the Defense Production Act. There's been a lot of controversy about this, and of course, a lot of scandal. I'll just leave it at that, but only say that, frankly, they have seen the opportunity with disrupted supply chains to step in to fulfill what I would consider to be a national need. And if Kodak has a respected brand, why shouldn't they do that if they have the skill set and the capability?